A fallen queen, a powerful king, and a spiritual trap that almost destroyed everything. Olori has taken her plea for mercy to the highest level, kneeling before the Deji of Akure to beg the woman she once called her rival, Queen Naomi. She is claiming responsibility for sin she didn't even commit, just to find peace. But wait, is this a genuine cry for help, or is Olori being used by the same shadows that manipulated her before? A short prayer for you. May every spiritual veil over your destiny be torn away, and may those who seek your downfall be put to shame. Amen. And not on our traditions. We hold the Yoruba culture in high regard, so we use fictional names for certain sacred rituals and titles. Stay with us and the hidden meanings will unfold perfectly. The sun was setting over the land of the Golden Crown, but the heat inside the palace of the Deji of Akure was just beginning to rise. This wasn't a normal royal visit, no, this was a mission of desperation. Olori, once the woman whose voice echoed with pride, was now standing at the gates of Akure with her family, her heart racing faster than a talking drum. They didn't just show up unannounced, they had sent word ahead, a pre-information as they called it, because they knew the weight of the matter they were bringing. They knew that the Deji of Akure isn't just a king, he is the spiritual father and protector of Queen Naomi. If there was any hope of reconciliation, it had to pass through him. When Olori finally stepped into the presence of the Deji, she didn't wait for a seat. She went straight to the floor. The sound of her knees fitting the palace tiles was heavy with sorrow. She began to cry, not the kind of tears you see in movies, but the deep, soul-shaking tears of a woman who has lost everything and is trying to find her way home. She begged the Deji to speak to Queen Naomi on her behalf. I am taking responsibility for everything, she sobbed, her voice trembling. The things I did and the things people said I did, even the ones I had no hand in, I carry them all today. I just want her to forgive me. This was a major turn of events. You see, the Golden King had already told her plainly that he would not force Queen Naomi to do anything. He told Olori that Queen Naomi is an integral part of his life. She is his world, his happiness and his peace. If Olori wanted mercy, she had to get it from the woman she had tried so hard to push away. The suspense in the room was like a thick fog. Olori talked about how she had tried to sever the relationship between the Golden King and Queen Naomi in the past. She confessed that she knew the Golden King loved Queen Naomi with a love that could not be denied, even if they never ended up together again. She admitted that her past actions were aimed at causing problems, but she claimed that deep down, she didn't do them intentionally because she was under a force she couldn't explain. As she knelt there pleading with the Deji, she recounted how the Golden King wouldn't even let her come close to his food or his personal space. The rejection from the Golden King was the final straw that broke her pride. She realized that without Queen Naomi's forgiveness, she would remain an outcast in the land of the Golden Crown. The Deji sat there, his face like a mask of ancient wisdom. He knew the history. He knew the humiliation Queen Naomi had suffered. He knew the tears the jewel had cried in private while Olori was making noise on the outside. The question hanging in the air was, would he even bother to call Queen Naomi, or would he tell Olori that she had finally reaped what she sowed? The family of Olori stood behind her, their heads bowed. They were part of this too. They had seen the transformation in her, how she went from a fiery queen to a broken woman. They knew that the Wahana in the palace had been fueled by something darker than just a woman's jealousy. There were whispers of the Golden Crown elders and their spiritual manipulations. There was talk of the clearance with the forest, a mysterious situation that was starting to reveal the truth behind the madness. Olori kept repeating her plea. Tell her I'm sorry, I take full responsibility. I'm not kidding, I am guilty of everything. It was a total surrender. She wasn't just begging for a place in the palace, she was begging for her soul to be free from the guilt that was eating her alive. But Queen Naomi is not any woman. She is a woman of deep grace and even deeper memory. Would she be able to look at Olori after all the framing, all the charms and all the public disgrace? The tension, it was so high that even the palace guards were holding their breath. This was a moment that would change the history of the land of the Golden Crown.
The palace of the Deji of Akure felt smaller as the weight of the confession filled every corner. As Olori remained on her knees, the Deji did something that changed everything. He sent for Queen Naomi. Now, you have to understand that Queen Naomi was already in Akure, busy with her own service and spiritual work. She didn't know that the woman who had been a thorn in her side for years was currently washing the palace floor with tears. When Queen Naomi walked in, the atmosphere shifted from heavy to freezing. The silence was so loud it was ringing in everyone's ears. Olori Shedo didn't even look up, she just increased the intensity of her weeping. This was the moment of truth. The Deji, acting like the father figure he is, looked at Queen Naomi and began to mediate. He spoke about the heavy burden of pain that the jewel had carried, the public humiliation and the many nights she spent crying in the land of the golden crown. To err is human, but to forgive is divine, the Deji whispered to Queen Naomi. He asked her what it would profit her to keep holding on to the resentment, even though everyone knew she had every right to be angry. Olori Shedo didn't even wait for Queen Naomi to speak. She cut in, her voice breaking into pieces. She started confessing things that made the people in the room exchange worried glances. She said, "I am guilty. Everything they said I did it. And the ones they said I didn't do, I'm taking the blame for those too. Just forgive me." This part of the gist is where it gets very deep. Why would a woman take blame for what she didn't do? It started to become clear that Olori Shedo was trying to break a cycle. She mentioned how she had been used to frame Queen Naomi, how people used charms and spiritual wahala to make sure there was no peace between them. She admitted that the people who were supposed to be her support system were actually the ones pulling the strings of her destruction. The suspense reached a boiling point when the conversation turned to the clearance from the forest. It's now coming to light that Olori Shedo wasn't just acting on her own bad heart as some people claimed. There was a massive manipulation from the Golden Crown elders. These men were the ones brainwashing her, using her as a weapon to fight Queen Naomi so they could control the palace. For the first time, the details of how the families tried to settle this matter months ago started to leak out. It turns out the family of Olori Shedo and the family of Blue had meetings, but every time they tried to reach a peace agreement, those powerful men, the Golden Crown elders, would step in and start a fresh fight. They didn't want peace, they wanted chaos because they thrived in it. They were the ones who kept the fire burning, making sure the land of the Golden Crown never knew a day of rest. Queen Naomi stood there, watching Olori Shedo. You could see the processing in her eyes. She wasn't looking at a rival anymore, she was looking at a victim of the same system that had tried to swallow her up too. The room was waiting for her to speak, to scream, or to walk away. The destiny of the palace was hanging by a thread.
The intensity inside the hall was enough to make a brave man tremble. Queen Naomi, standing tall with the grace of a woman who had survived 1,000 storms, finally opened her mouth to speak. Everyone expected fire, but what came out was a calmness that was even more terrifying. She looked at Olori Shedo, who was still trembling on the floor, and she sighed. A long, heavy sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all the years of palace wahala. Queen Naomi turned to the Deji of Akure and said, "I hold no resentment against her. For a very long time, I had already decided to leave Olori Shedo to her own path. I chose to be on my own." The room gasped. You see, in the land of the Golden Crown, people expected a tit-for-tat battle. But Queen Naomi showed that her spirit was on a different level. However, don't think for a second that this meant everything was back to normal. The suspense deepened when Queen Naomi made it clear that while she had let go of the anger, the distance would remain. She wasn't ready to have Olori Shedo back in her space. Forgiveness is divine, but wisdom says you don't put your hand back into the same fire that burnt you. But as the meeting continued, the real cocoa of the matter began to spill out. The Deji started revealing things that would make your hair stand on end. He spoke to Queen Naomi, reminding her of all the things he had told her in private. "I told you to hold on," the Deji said, because what was happening was bigger than you could ever imagine. It was at this point that the talk of charms and spiritual framing became the main topic. They began to discuss how the Golden Crown elders had used deep, dark secrets to turn everyone against the jewel. They used charms to make sure that even the simplest conversation between the Golden King and Queen Naomi turned into a fight. They framed her for things she never dreamt of. They wanted to destroy her image so completely that she would never be able to show her face in the land of the Golden Crown. Olori's shadow was nodding her head in shame as these things were being said. She admitted that she allowed herself to be the face of that evil, even if she wasn't the one who came up with the plans. She talked about how the elders would brainwash her, telling her that Queen Naomi was the enemy she needed to crush. They had aligned their dark purposes with her life until she became a stranger to herself. The shocker was when it was revealed that even the family of Olori's shadow had been under pressure. Anytime they tried to do the right thing or settle the dispute, those powerful men would start a spiritual war against them. This was why we saw people like Orokiton and others fighting so hard in the past. It wasn't just a physical disagreement, it was a battle of spirits. The people watching this play out realized that Olori's shadow wasn't just begging for Queen Naomi's forgiveness. She was begging for her life. She realized that the people she thought were her backbone were actually the ones digging her grave. She was a pawn that had finally seen the hand of the player. The Deji of Akure looked at both women, the one who had been the victim and the one who had been the tool. He knew that the healing of the land of the Golden Crown depended on this moment. But could Queen Naomi truly feel safe knowing that the people who manipulated Olori's shadow are still out there? Could the Golden King ever trust the peace that was being brokered in tears? The air was thick with the realization that even though the truth was coming out, the danger was far from over.
The tension in the Deji of Akure's palace reached a breaking point as the final words of this heavy meeting were spoken. Olori Ebony was still there, her face swollen from crying, waiting for a final word that would tell her if she still had a future within the royal circle. The Deji, looking at the two women, spoke with a voice that carried the authority of the ancestors. He pleaded one last time with Queen Naomi to find that deep place of mercy, not just for Olori Ebony, but for the sake of the peace of the entire land of the Golden Crown. Queen Naomi, with a heart of gold but the mind of a woman who had learned her lesson, stood her ground. She made it clear that while she has released the pain and holds no grudge, she wants to be on her own. She does not want Olori Ebony anywhere near her personal space. Everyone should stay on their side, seemed to be the silent message. She has forgiven the past, but she's protecting her future. Olori Ebony accepted this with a bowed head. She knew she couldn't ask for more after the amount of wahala that had happened. She vowed that she would never again allow herself to be used as a weapon against the jewel or the Golden King. She apologized to everyone, the palace guards, the families involved, and the entire land of the Golden Crown. She admitted that the spiritual manipulation she went through was so deep that it almost cost her sanity, and she is just grateful to have a second chance to live a quiet life. As they prepared to leave the presence of the Deji, it became clear to everyone that the Golden Crown elders who started this fire are now the ones in trouble. Their charms are failed, their power surrendered, and the truth is finally shining like the morning sun. The palace is changing, and the era of using people to fame the innocent is coming to a messy end. My crown gives friends and families. Before we wrap up today's update, I have to remind you that everything we have discussed here is based on rumors and alleged information that is currently making the rounds on social media. These are social media rumors and should not be taken as absolute truth or seen as verified fact yet. We are just bringing you the gist as it is being talked about in the digital streets.